Hi, and welcome to Dopamine Doubt. I'm your host, Rachel, a licensed clinical social worker specializing in ADHD and OCD. On this show, I will be speaking from both my clinical and lived experience as we explore the surprisingly common crossover of ADHD and OCD. Because when we understand which is in the driver's seat, we are better able to know what we need in that moment. Whether you're living right at the intersection of both or navigate life with one of these neurotypes, you're welcome here. As always, please take what is helpful and leave what isn't. Neurodivergence shows up differently for everyone, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Okay, let's dive in. Let's talk about ERP. This stands for Exposure and Response Prevention and is the gold standard for OCD treatment. It is not just making people do scary things. It's truly changing your relationship with fear by changing what you do after anxiety shows up. And so on this particular episode, I want to really lay out what this treatment can look like, and then also talk about what you will hear me discuss throughout the podcast around acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, self-compassion, and uncertainty tolerance for OCD. So I want to go ahead and zoom out to give a framework for how all of those fit together. And that is ERP. Because these approaches never replace ERP, but they can really strengthen it, and they can help people be able to do the hard things that ERP asks us to do. So first, let's start with some quick reminders. Obsessions involve intrusive, unwanted, and repetitive thoughts, feelings, sensations, urges, and images. And compulsions are the repetitive behaviors OCD sufferers feel the urge to enact in order to gain short-term relief from anxiety and symptoms caused by the obsessions. Compulsions typically show up as either avoidance, reassurance seeking, mental compulsions, self-punishment, or physical behaviors. So we slowly are going to scale back on those compulsions to get OCD more under control. So with exposure and response prevention, there are two parts. We have the exposure, which is intentionally allowing yourself to encounter uncertainty, maybe an intrusive thought, an uncomfortable sensation, or a situation that's around your obsession. And then the response prevention gives the brain an opportunity to learn that you can handle the discomfort and uncertainty that comes when you're not relying on compulsions. So the question is not necessarily what you're doing, but what that behavior is teaching your brain. And if the message becomes, I'm only safe because I checked or avoided or analyzed or got reassurance, then this is just going to make OCD stronger. If we make the message, I can experience uncertainty and keep living my life, this is where recovery happens. So in an ERP session, typically we would then create a fear hierarchy for our most difficult fears to our least. And then we would plan exposures accordingly. It's really a list of situations, thoughts, experiences related to OCD that are then organized from the least distressing to the most distressing. It can help someone practice approaching uncertainty gradually rather than jumping straight into the most difficult situation. And there are approaches with ERP that do that, and that is absolutely fine. And we'll talk about those at some point too. I typically go with the more gradual exposures in my practice, but there's evidence for both ways of doing it. So a fear hierarchy is really a map or a practice plan for teaching our brain that fear and uncertainty can be there while we live our lives. Truthfully, exposure creates the learning opportunity, and then response prevention allows the learning to happen. If I had to choose between a perfect exposure with poor response prevention or an imperfect exposure with excellent response prevention, I would choose the second every time. An example of this, okay, you're doing an exposure, client touches a doorknob, but then it was too high of an exposure and they immediately wash their hands for 20 minutes. This is just reinforcing for them that we washed our hands and that's the only reason we're safe. So was that a therapeutic exposure? Probably not. Now imagine if we touch a doorknob, even if it's not a planned exposure, but then we do our response prevention and we resist washing our hands. Much more learning has happened because the compulsion was not completed. And that's where, if we break the loop of the OC cycle, which is obsession compulsion cycle, our brain starts to learn something different. This is why I focus so much on the concepts themselves, because so many of my clients have the sneakier compulsions, such as mental rumination, self-punishment, and reassurance seeking. And the response prevention really is key, especially for those. So an example, if someone had the intrusive thought, what if I harm someone? That itself is the exposure, potentially, in that situation. And the response prevention is then not doing whatever compulsion you normally would do. So that could be analyzing, checking your memory, reassuring yourself that it will be okay. So this is where the supplemental therapies can come in. And in my practice, I really try and focus on skill building in sessions so that these skills can translate across OCD themes. Because for a lot of us, there's multiple themes, or our OCD likes to what they call whack-a-mole between different themes. And there can be quite a few. So typically, I start with response prevention strategies, and these include the supplemental therapy supports that I'm about to talk about, and again, will show up in podcasts throughout this series. So acceptance and commitment therapy. This can help you stay present during an exposure and give an alternative way of responding as well. ACT really focuses on staying in the present moment, assessing your values, diffusion, which is getting a little bit of space from something, acceptance, which is, well, you know what acceptance is, and self as context. And truly, these help to not need our anxiety to completely be gone. Instead, ACT says, I can make room for this while I move towards what matters to me. And that is response prevention. DBT, on the other hand, dialectical behavior therapy, can support distress tolerance. So instead of escaping immediately, it can help us observe urges, tolerate uncertainty, practice willingness, or ride the wave of anxiety. And again, those are all amazing response prevention skills. Where does self-compassion fit? Exposure and response prevention is hard. And those of us with OCD and ADHD tend to be extremely hard on ourselves already. Self-compassion is not reassurance. Instead, it says, this is hard, and I'm willing to keep practicing. This can help continue exposures instead of quitting. Truly, this is the core of ERP. Every exposure is asking, can I let there be uncertainty without trying to eliminate it? The content doesn't really matter. It can be relationship OCD, health-related OCD, responsibility, perfectionism. Those targets always uncertainty. Now, if you also have ADHD, here is where things get a little more interesting. So how we make ERP doable. We can use body doubling during an exposure. And that's essentially, I covered it in the ADHD episode, but when someone is there with you as an external support or structure. We can use timers to prevent getting stuck. Sometimes shorter time frames are needed because of our attention differences. We can use visual reminders of response prevention plans, and we can break exposures down into smaller steps. Sometimes we also start with higher exposures on the fear hierarchy because by starting higher up with more challenging exposures, the therapy provides intensity that matches the brain's baseline. And that can help us engage more effectively. So what I want you to take away, hopefully, is the core of ERP is not to make anyone suffer. It's discovering that you can experience discomfort or urges, anxiety, without letting them dictate your behavior and choice. And then ACT, DBT, self-compassion, and uncertainty tolerance are there to support. They are tools that can help us practice. And that's OCD treatment in a nutshell. I hope you'll join me to break apart more of the nuance in later episodes. Take care. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not replace professional mental health care. If you are struggling, please reach out to a qualified mental health provider who can work with you directly. What I share here comes from my clinical experience and my own journey, but your situation is unique to you. If you are in crisis, please contact 988 or go to your nearest emergency room. Thanks for being here.